Humanoid robots aren't really hype anymore. They are here. And I predict that by the year 2030, there will be 1 million humanoid robots in commercial deployment.
I would like to refer to the quotation of CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang. He mentioned that the future of AI is robotics. And
Yes.
to emphasize that for them, the development vector of AI is not just robots, but especially humanoid robots.
And in fact, in one of his other talks, he said that there is no reason why in the future, everything around us ought to be smart and mobile. And that's speaking to that fundamental step that we've taken in having real-time, real-world navigation ability in robotic technology. We've got a great ability as people to anthropomorphize the objects around us. So it's no surprise that we're looking for new technologies that can play part of that kind of drive to create characters around us.
Today, I have very special guest, Andrea Kay, Managing Director of Silicon Valley Robotics, a leading organization supporting the development of robotic technologies. Nice to see you here in Warsaw. Andrea, I remember your presentation during Masters and Robots conference. I remember that you explained us that the first robots were created for sex industry. I'm just wondering, please confirm, can we say that the adult industry is partially responsible for the development of robotics technology? Maybe let's start from this plot. What do you think?
I think it's certainly something we should talk about. It isn't often talked about. And it's part of the course for the development of technology, where the adult industries were very often the first adopters of new technologies. And very often that was where the initial funding for those technologies and the development of them actually came from. And this goes all the way back to the printing press. And that was sending out spicy books. And that led on to things like the development of paperbacks. And that wasn't high-end literature, that was smutty stuff. The same thing with the development of camera and photographic technologies. And then we saw the same thing with the development of video and VHS technologies. And then on the internet, the development of online payment systems was really driven by adult industries. So it's no surprise that a lot of the most realistic work into humanoid bodies for robots was being done by the adult industry, and that is an increasingly large share of the industry in places like China, for example. And yes, and it's not limited there. I think I bring up China because it's been a very rapid growth in adult industry in China, but they have a loneliness epidemic. And we realize, of course, we have both aging populations and loneliness epidemics across the world. And that means that many people feel that they can't find real companionship. This is an area that we're seeing companion AI as well being developed. I think that this is an area where we as people anthropomorphize our world around us very, very easily. And by that I mean we give things around us personalities. And you only have to think about how successful animated movies are. And this isn't animated movies that look exactly like real people. Think about the original Disney animation and how much we sympathize and empathize with things like cartoon cats and rabbits. No, we've got a great ability as people to anthropomorphize the objects around us. So it's no surprise that we're looking for new technologies that can play part of that kind of drive to create characters around us.
Yeah, I will ask you about aging society later
Mhm.
for a few minutes, but right now, I would like to ask you about something from my point of view, and actually, I presume that most of us locate humanoid robots from in the science fiction field. Correct me if I am wrong. But I'm just wondering, what are we thinking about humanoids?
Humanoid robots aren't really hype anymore. They are here. And I predict
They're
that
here.
by the year 2030, there will be 1 million humanoid robots in commercial deployment. I'm not the only person that's talking similar type figures. There have been reports by most all of the major consulting groups, but this figure is based on the actual production plans of the top handful of humanoid robot companies, the ones that already have not pilots with customers, but actual commercial deployments. That's what has started this year. We've moved from pilots to real deployments and to real production scaling plans for the leading humanoid companies. And I track maybe a dozen of what I would call the leading humanoid companies, but that's in a field that is well over 100. Most of which I don't think will succeed, but the fact that there are more than 100 companies trying to build humanoid robots at the moment, I think speaks to the fact that we've hit certain tipping points enabling this technology to meet the expectations, or at least to start meeting our expectations of it. And that's significantly different to the state of the technology 10 years ago. But we could see those key milestones coming towards us. It's a combination of developments in both the technology, developments in AI, developments in the commercial adoption of robotics and investment into robotics. And it's also developments in simulation. And all of those things together have created a remarkably, sometimes it's called a Cambrian explosion in robotics, and that's every sort of robot.
Exactly. Right now, we are seeing a Cambrian explosion in the evolution of humanoid robots. And my prediction is there will be 1 million deployed robot by 2020. 30. So
Yes.
now, this was forecast from October to 2024. And right now, you still, let me say, maintain these predictions, yes? And
I see more and more evidence that that prediction is on track.
when I saw you in Warsaw, I was surprised how your presentation is realistic, how your presentation is pragmatic, let me say. But we will refer to some points, but ask you, how do you define the key attributes of humanoid robot?
I think that's a really good question. And I've been part of the current humanoid standards study group where the definition of what is a humanoid is a very active discussion. I don't know that there is one set solution, but in a rub, it means that a robot that is human-like, and that can cover a range all the way up to what some people would prefer to call an android, where it is an imitation human, to where they are human-like, but very often without very well-defined faces or facial features. They certainly do not have the appearance of skin or potentially 5 fingers. And arguably, do we actually need 5 fingers for a humanoid to be successful? And at the other end of the scale, we can go to very, very rudimentary humanoids that might be able to be some examples. You might have seen pictures of quadruped robots that stand up on the 2 back legs, and they look rather like a humanoid when they do that. And that, I think, is a rudimentary humanoid. And one of the key aspects about that is 2 legs, 2
Yes.
leg arms, and the extension of that range is, but what if you just don't have the lower half at all? What if you have a top half that has 2 kind of arms and some kind of head, and that torso is then mounted on a chassis on wheels? And I think that we call those, we're still trying to work that out. And I would say that humanoid generally means with the 2 legs, but I think you can also do a lot with these half humanoids, where you have an upper humanoid body and you have the rest on wheels. Interestingly, one of the first examples of this was the NASA Valkyrie robot. And if you looked at the way that was developed, it had a legged version. It also had a torso, an upper half version that could be mounted onto a robot arm or could operate separately inside other equipment. So it can make sense to have that adaptability. And for me, this is what I find really fascinating about robots, is they have all these extra superpowers. And that, to me, is the greatest attraction. Not how close to human they can be, but how many extra and other things they can do.
Andrea, I must tell you that I like very much what you said in Warsaw, because you said that robots are not our imitation or replacement. We are talking about humanoid robots, but it's not our imitations or replacement. They are our allies. They are our friends. An augmentation and extension, a superpower for people and humanity. And this was very strong. It was key message of a presentation, key statement. You explained that humanoids are a sum of growing technology, miniaturization of electronics, and the development of navigation and sensors. And you emphasize that this is a growing technology. And right now we put a lot of investment in those technology. That's why we are talking about the rapid development of robots. I would like to refer to the quotation of CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang. He mentioned that the future of AI is robotics. And to emphasize that for them, the development vector of AI is not just robots, but especially humanoid robots.
And in fact, in one of his other talks, he said that there is no reason why in the future, everything around us ought to be smart and mobile. And that's speaking to that fundamental step that we've taken in having real-time, real-world navigation ability in robotic technology. And robotic technology doesn't have to be in a humanoid body. Robotic technology is in our cars, even if they're not fully self-driving. They include robotic technology. Robotic technology is in our microwave ovens. But there are many things that we just call products rather than robots. They're getting increasingly smart. And in fact, in the future, I'm looking forward to having robots inside my house that look like furniture, but they're capable of smart mobility, and yet they're functional as the furniture is. My table ought to be able to move on voice command to wherever I need it to be, or my chair. And we've seen some people exploring already with ideas of modular adaptable houses where walls and furnishings adjust so that you can change the way in which you're living within a space. And, you know, I think that's just the start of it. I really think that we're all going to have some robots in our house in the next 10 years, and they probably won't be humanoids, because I still think only the early adopters and will have humanoid robots in the home. But I do know that there will be some people with humanoid robots in the home. And back to your first point about how does this work with AI? One of the primary reasons that we will have humanoid robots in the home isn't because they'll be capable of being great at helping us. It's because this is how they will learn to be great at helping us. And this is why robotics is now the next step for AI. We really had maxed out the amount of intelligence and language models, particularly language models, large-scale language models, LLMs, that we could extract from the internet in the form of text. We've done the same thing with image. And in fact, some of the first real developments in AI were coming through image classifications. And we've moved on to video and trying to create as much intelligence around learning from video online. But a huge amount of what we would like to learn from is not digitized, is not online. And it's all of that information about how do we interact as people? How do we do our daily jobs? What activities happen in the real world, in the physical world? And how do we develop AI that understands the real physical world? We need to be capable of digitizing interactions in the real physical world to continue to expand AI. And so now I think a lot of the investment that's going into robots, particularly humanoid robots, is because they are going to be amazing intermediaries between artificial intelligence and the physical real world. They'll be able to take things that we haven't digitized in the form of YouTube videos or photographs, and in fact, in any of the ways that we've been able to scrape data. Our robots will be out there and they'll be able to help collect data that is going to allow us to have far better ability to create the next generation of technology, robots, to help us with activity in the real world. And for me, this is what has me excited about robotics, is how we apply robotics to the world's global challenges. You know, how do we develop the best robots for agriculture if we're not capable of having as much data as possible about what it is like to be doing agricultural work?
We'll talk about applications for robotics. I have some questions, but let me refer to quotation of Jeff Cardenas, CEO of Apollo, because it also surprised me, because he stated that there is no reason why humanoid robots should cost more than a car.
I think he's absolutely correct when it comes to
He's correct.
economies of scale and mass production. I don't think we're there yet. Now, many of the companies that are leading the way in humanoid robots have also had a background in developing actuators, motor technology for robots. And I think that's a very important fundamental skill set, because humanoid robots do require a lot of different actuators. And this might be more complex. It's a little different to an automobile. However, Jeff understands the actuator business, and he says ultimately, once we are at mass production level, then it comes down to the cost of the raw materials. And when you look at the raw materials involved in a humanoid robot, it's a quarter of the raw materials in a car, if not less. So I think there's very sound argument that he's making. I think it might take us a while to get there, because it's really about the economies of scale, production at mass. And you have to look at how long, for example, it took us to get used to mass production of automobiles. So Henry Ford's first Model T came off the production line in 1908. And it took 10 years for them to have produced 1 million. But in the next 10 years, they were producing more than 10 million. And then before another 10 years was out, Ford production might have only doubled, but many, many other companies were now also mass producing cars. So you can look at the period of time it takes you to get from 1 to 1 million is around about the same length of time it takes you to go from 1 million to 10 plus million. So At the moment, we're still in it's taking us a while to get to 1 million stage. But after that, things will change comparatively rapidly.
Economy scale and exponential technology. Here's our reality, yes.
Yes.
I can say. So we can assume that we will have humanoid robot in our homes because you also explained that robots can address challenges with aging society, yes, especially in developed countries. This was your strong message, if I remember. So we can imagine a world when humanoid robots can support us as caregivers for seniors, for example, yes?
It's certainly our future, whether or not it's going to be widespread in the next 30 years. Sometimes that's where I worry, because we don't
Yes.
always drive investment towards the most valuable and useful technologies for us as a society. That's what drew me to Silicon Valley Robotics, and all of us, I think, shared this vision of how do we continue to push towards getting mass production of robots that create a better world for as many people as possible. I'm sure it's possible to have really cool robots that are still only good for a few people. And what we want to see is this potential of robotic technology to solve our global challenges and to have an impact on issues like aging population as rapidly as possible. And it's tricky because those are industries that traditionally don't get the right level of investment and support. They tend to be fragmented marketplaces. But this is where having robotic furniture in our house, I think, is going to be as important as we age as having, say, a humanoid. And at the moment, for example, there's a company called Diligent Robotics. Very cool.
Diligent? Yes.
Yes. And their robot is kind of a half humanoid. It has a sort of torso and arm, and probably they'll be adding it to be 2 arms at some point. And it's on a wheeled base. But it assists in hospitals, allowing our limited nursing staff to be the ones doing the face-to-face patient care, while the robot is what runs to and fro the supply closets, fetching whatever supplies the nursing staff need. So the ways in which we're not going to be replacing people, but can we allow people to be spending more time doing the things that people do best by having robots that are capable of coming into the same environment, like having extra shifts of people, but doing the tasks that are the dirty, dull, dangerous parts of the job, shall we say. And I know we also have, this is where, when I think about what my mother, who's 93, needs, she needs a mobile table that comes when it's called and that can carry her cups of tea and her meals from the kitchen where she prepares them out to where she sits and eats, or helps take her laundry basket from the bedroom to the laundry and helps carry the shopping from the doorstep into the kitchen. So she doesn't have to lift and carry heavy objects. So it can go beyond that, because then perhaps we can have a situation where if she's put down her, let's say, the TV remote control or her glasses somewhere, is there a way that she can ask her furniture to find it? So that's having robotic technology without it looking like a humanoid robot, but still providing a really good level of the things that you want to have in your home. And it is where we start to face the 2 different ways that robots can go, where robots can be there for us for social companionship, but they can also be there for us when we would prefer to have privacy, and we're not interested in having a robot be there and be watching. We want it just to be there to do things for us. We don't want to think about it as if I have
Watching,
somebody else
assessing.
in my house. Yes, like another person. And those are strengths
Very
and
important.
weaknesses. Yes. And I think many of us, we'd like to have access to robotics, but we wouldn't necessarily want to feel like there was a robot always watching us. And these are, I sometimes talk about the 5 laws of robotics. One of these is that robots must be transparent and truthful. And this comes to the core idea of, do we actually know who is watching through a robot's eyes? Because that might be being remotely operated, or it might be being recorded in ways that can be seen by other people at other times. It's important that we know whether or not those things are happening, and that we're able to create the boundaries that we find appropriate to the situation in that. And there are ways that we can address that. So as well as saying, here are 5 laws of robotics, I also have, here are 5 ways that we've addressed these issues with other technologies in the past. And that can include things like registries. It can include things like what has been looked at for ethical AI, having benchmark transparency, model cards, explaining exactly what a system is capable of. In the health industry, we have independent ethical review boards. So we should be seeing things like that, saying, here is the best standard of care for having a robot in your house. And in many ways, I do think that humanoid robots, we need to take a lot of this direction from the health industry, because a robot that's having a social interaction with us is very much capable also of having an impact on our emotional and financial health, as well as our physical health.
Emotional and financial health, yes.
Yes, I can give some examples of that, because we sometimes think about this when it comes to AI, things like deep fakes, things like phishing, and the ability to extract information from us or to manipulate us into taking actions that we might not have otherwise done because of the intelligence there. Well, robots are physically embodied AI and have all of these capabilities. Beyond that, they're also very much in the embodiment. It plays into our natural tendencies to anthropomorphize, to treat it as though it is a person, instead of realizing that when we treat something as a person, we have this set of, here are the behaviors that it could do, and here are the reasons that it would do those behaviors. But a robot might be doing behaviors for a completely different set of reasons. A robot, it would be a commercial product. In many ways, a robot would be, and it can be as sophisticatedly informed as the advertising industry could make it. What is the end goal of a commercially deployed robot with all of this sophistication at beck and call? Perhaps it's not there to, is it working for us, or is it actually, in some ways, making us the product or making us the work? In the most, I think, harmless way is the fact that we really do need to collect data on how to interact in the physical world. And we as people will be helping to train robots that will allow them to become more functional and to help us in the ways that we do need to have assistance from robotics. We're facing a real decline in labor, in shortages of people to do a lot of the dirty, dull, and dangerous jobs. And we need to fill those tasks. We need to find ways to free people up. People have already said there's a lot of things in the world that they don't want to do. We do want,
especially young people.
Yes. So we're really kind of following behind the directions people are already giving, saying, okay, so how do we most rapidly create useful robotic technology that can enable us to lead the sort of life we'd like to lead And we want to make sure that that matches up, that we're not helping get really great robots that then aren't helping us. And that's where I think understanding robots need to be good products. They need to be transparent. We need to understand what is happening and with the data that a robot is collecting and utilizing. There are already discussions around this, because if you put, say, mobile robots into a factory or warehouse, then the company that is managing that factory or warehouse will have requirements that data is restricted to only their access, that privacy is maintained. We see this also in the health industries. So we just need to learn how to make that more widespread across all of the industries that we'll see robotics technologies.
Andrea, popularization of this technology is pretty difficult. How do you find this? Because I'm listening to you, and I have the impression that right now, extremely important is popularization of this technology, explanation of this technology, presenting different area of application implementation, but also building trust.
Yes, there are some areas where we absolutely see the lack of trust. And frequently
Yes.
that's in places where people say robots are taking jobs. And sometimes the reality is that if companies are not using robots, then the company is not going to be competitive. It's going to fail. And that's where the majority of jobs are lost. So people get scared when they think that robots are moving into their work areas, but they really need to worry if robotic technologies are not, because those are industries that are not competitive even in the short term. Because all of the large companies have been investing significantly in robotic technology. They're already fairly well traveled down this pathway. So smaller companies have to catch up, or else they will not be competitive. But we get very much fooled into thinking that one robot equals one person's jobs. And it doesn't work that way. A robot can do some parts of a job. Humans are incredibly flexible and can very easily move from one job to another job to multiple tasks within the job. Robots are going to still be quite limited in what they're capable of doing. And it opens up a whole lot of new positions for people where they help supervise robots, help make sure that the other things that need to happen are able to happen. They can become the robot supervisors, the robot helpers. I can picture, in many ways, robotic technology is an extension from the hand tool to the power tool to the autonomous tool, so that you have people that are doing jobs ranging from welding to landscaping to plumbing or construction work, all of those kind of blue-collar jobs. We have independent contractors that bring people and tools. Now they will bring robot tools, and their people will be supervising and making sure that the robot is, for example, in a landscaping company, that you've got a robot mowing the lawn, a robot trimming the hedges, and a robot weeding the gardens. And you need a person to make sure that that's all happening properly. And then you can pack up those robots and move on to the next job. For welding, for example, and this is where unions are starting to say, hey, instead of saying no robots, no way, most of our union members are aging. We don't have new young welders coming through.
Yeah.
All of our experienced people, they're welders, but they've also got bad backs and they're very close to retirement age. And many of them are thinking, I can't keep doing this heavy labor. But with a welding robot that's capable of going up and down the side of a building on its own, then your job as a welder is to supervise it, to make sure it's doing the welds at the right time in the right place. But your job isn't to be holding it and holding the welding torch and physically doing that labor anymore. So this is where it's promising, and
Promising.
workers and unions can see that with our aging workforce, we need to be using technologies that don't cause as much pain to the human. But not every group yet sees how positive the technologies could be.
Yeah. I'm thinking my personal opinion is that we are ready to implement robots in factories because contemporary economy needs robotics and automatization. And we are talking a lot about this in Poland. And this is pretty clear, but the different thing is when we are talking about robots in our homes, robots which will support us as caregivers, because as we discussed, we are talking about privacy, about intimacy, about some sensitive aspects. I would like to ask you about your organization, because Silicon Valley Robotics is a leading organization. We are supporting the development of robotics technology. And what are your main tasks? What are your main priorities as organization?
In our first 5 years, and we were formed in 2010, I felt that our primary goal, as well as
Yes.
coordinating, bringing together the robotics community in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco region, was to increase the amount of investment, to persuade investors that this was a viable technology. And
Investors.
there were a small group of investors that were ready, and there were a lot of the larger venture firms that weren't really ready to talk about robotics. But we did a lot of events to connect groups together, to showcase what was happening in early stage robotics companies. And at the same time, investment in robotics around the world started to grow. And we particularly saw this in the Bay Area. So we had reached $1 billion invested into robotics technologies globally by 2015. And at that time, we spread our efforts to work to create bridges between the robotics industry and the very early stage robotics startups emerging in different industries, and to create bridges to the other industry associations in areas like agriculture, construction, medical or health robotics, space robotics, and retail and logistics. And those would turn out to be two of the really big growth areas. What we found is that a company like Amazon or Walmart knew how to get in touch with robotics companies, but the majority of the other next tier retailers and logistics companies, they needed to have more connections and more of an understanding of what robotics technologies were ready and how they would connect with them. So that's continuing to happen across a range of different industries as that Cambrian explosion has happened. And we're starting to see robotics be relevant to every industry. And most recently, I say our last 5-year real strategic focus is on addressing early stage production and manufacturing. And we see an increasing number of robotics companies choose to manufacture wherever they are, not to, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, the playbook was quite obvious. You manufactured overseas via large-scale contract manufacturing. Now, particularly because robotics is often a sensitive technology, and for early-stage companies, you don't necessarily want to expose all of the secrets of how you do things. This is not commodity technology yet. So you'll find that manufacturing robots is more a case of local manufacturing wherever you are, utilizing a better supply chain and learning how to do this. And we've spent more time. We have a very successful workshop that we've partnered with IEEE Robotics Automation Society, and IEEE entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And we've developed a workshop, a checklist, and
Workshops.
from prototype to product. What do you need to know to start manufacturing? And part of delivering those workshops is also making connections in different local areas. And we've delivered this workshop around the world to connecting them to people who are product design specialists and or
Mhm.
smaller contract manufacturers and supply chain experts within the local region that the companies are. And I think this is an interesting part of the whole sustainable and circular design and manufacturer movement. Wouldn't it be great if Simple Products did not ship their components around the world 7 times?
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
you know, this is a broader argument, but I think we've specialized so many things. So you have a company that builds this thing, and they might be in Brazil, and you have another company in Singapore that builds this other thing, and you have a company in Germany that puts those 2 things together with 3 other things and creates a sub-component that is then shipped to Canada to get put together
Or to
in
just in the
something
supply
else
chain, yes.
that goes somewhere else, so that products go around the world 7 times. And
Mm.
we can move away from that specialization to start to do more variable manufacturing more locally. And that is going to reduce a lot of the carbon costs that are involved in production. So I see robotics as being part of this circular and sustainable manufacturing movement.
Yes. So a lot of workshops and a lot of industry events. And
Yes.
as I noticed, just consistent supply chain will be extremely important.
Yes, I think, you know, this is going to be challenging. I really don't know what the focus for the next 5 years is going to be with the current situation changing so rapidly. But
Yes.
it comes down to, how do we support the core competencies for this complex systems technology? And perhaps the focus for the next 5 years is going to be helping tell people how to transition from the work that they're currently doing, whether it's in sales or software development or supply chain management, how they can transition into
Mhm.
working in robotics. Because that's another thing. Not only does the world need to be producing more robots, but we need more people in the robotics industry to be doing that.
Andra, tell me what can I wish you in your profession?
Well, I would love the opportunity to spend a little more time in some of the wonderful places that I've visited, helping set up. One of the things that I'm very proud of, actually, as part of
Yes.
Silicon Valley Robotics, is I've explored creating an accelerator, a new form of accelerator, an open ecosystem accelerator for robotics and for hardware technologies. And
Mhm.
the best version of this is now our partner's Circuit Launch. And Circuit Launch is a co-work space for hardware
Mhm.
startups, particularly robotics startups, but everything from biotech to IoT to electronics to sensor tech to software for those technologies. And robotics is really a kind of culmination of all of those. So Circuit Launch is now, we have 2 circuit launches in the Bay Area, and a third one is going to open later this year. And that's providing a space for, at the moment, almost 100 different robotics companies or hardware companies to work out of. And it is not just making it very affordable for a small company to start building and to grow or contract. We're very flexible in response to this, but it's within a community. So the other things that are great is that you always find people that can answer questions that you have within the community. And you can find people that can be what you would call fractional hires. So you can leverage the skills in the community around you very rapidly.
Yes.
And for me, this is what an accelerator is really about. We get a little confused thinking, oh, an accelerator gives you money and that helps you grow rapidly. But those type of accelerators also take ownership shares from you. And that can be a very expensive thing to give away. And money, if you don't know how to use it or don't have access to the resources that you need, then the money goes very quickly. So we say your time is money. We help you accelerate. We help you solve problems as rapidly as possible. And that gives you, if it gives you better resources than you would get otherwise. And it's not time limited either. It doesn't matter what stage you're at, and it doesn't matter how long you need to use those services. It's a very straightforward model, and it's open. It's not, only our portfolio companies have access to that benefit. So I've been driven as part of the mission of Silicon Valley Robotics is to support all of the robotics ecosystem. So while individual VCs and firms would do good things creating accelerators, they were always limited. And so now with Circuit Launch Online, this is creating an open accelerator ecosystem. And as someone who's an Australian in the United States, I'd love to see, we have a number of Australian companies currently using circuit launches in the Silicon Valley region. But what if there was another circuit launch landing pad and we could start to do more two-way traffic? So we can also help companies coming from other locations, say, to move into Australia. And so I see this as being part of the global open accelerator ecosystem for robotics technologies.
Global ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I find most exciting in the future.
You are very active in each area. You have to be active in each area. Just act globally to boost the ecosystem, as you said. So, Andra, thank you very much for our talk. Thank you for sharing your inspiration, your passion, because I'm hearing this. I wish you and your organization a lot of progress in creation of future in which we and robots will cooperate together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.